I need to vent because I genuinely don't understand how I became the bad guy here. My husband Ryan just had his birthday, and instead of celebrating how much effort I put into making it special, he's acting like I stabbed him in the back or something. Look, Ryan is one of those people who loves birthdays, like the kind of guy who thinks it's totally normal to have a playlist, a cake with some big theme, and a full house of people just for turning another year older. He says it's about creating memories, but honestly, it feels a little much sometimes. Me? I'm more practical. A nice dinner, maybe a thoughtful gift, and we move on. We're adults, you know? But because I love him, I always try to go along with his ideas. This year, he's been dropping hints about how he wanted this birthday to be extra special because work has been rough lately. He's been juggling a big project and feeling stressed, so I figured, fine, I'll plan a small party. I invited his closest friends, got him a practical gift I knew he needed, and even let him pick the playlist because that's his thing. Then there's the song. Oh my god, the song. Ryan's been playing this one track on repeat for weeks, saying how it's so meaningful to him. I swear it's just some cheesy love song from when we first started dating. I barely even remember it. But Ryan has this whole sentimental thing about it, how it played during some road trip we took when we were first falling in love. Sweet, right? Except that was like 10 years ago, and I didn't realize we were still holding on to random playlists from our 20s, like they're sacred relics. Fast forward to the party. Everyone's having a good time, the music's playing, and then the song comes on. Ryan lights up like a kid at Disney World, and suddenly he's giving this little speech to our friends about how much the song means to him, how it reminds him of our early days together. And I'm standing there, holding a plate of snacks, thinking, seriously, we're making this song a whole moment? So I said something. I don't even remember my exact words. Something like, are we really making this our whole personality now? It was supposed to be lighthearted, a little joke to break the sappiness of the moment. I mean, come on. Everyone was staring at him like he was giving a TED talk on love songs. But oh no, Ryan didn't take it that way. The room got a little quiet, sure, but I thought we moved on. Except now he's mad at me. He says I ruined the moment, and that the song isn't just a song, it's a symbol of our love or something. Now he's barely talking to me, and I'm sitting here wondering how one little joke could overshadow all the effort I put into making his birthday great. Like, am I crazy? Or is this just a massive overreaction? The thing about Ryan is that he's a sentimental guy. It's one of the things I loved about him when we first started dating, how he'd remember the tiniest details about me, like the way I always order extra pickles on burgers, or the time I offhandedly mentioned that my favorite flowers were sunflowers. He'd show up with them out of nowhere, and I'd feel so seen, you know? But after 10 years together, I feel like those little quirks have gone from sweet to a bit much. Like the song. He's been going on and on about it for weeks leading up to his birthday. It's from this road trip we took early in our relationship. Our first big adventure, as he calls it. I'll admit, the trip was special. We were still in that honeymoon phase. Everything felt new. And, yeah, we might have played that song a few too many times. But here's the thing. I honestly forgot about it. I mean, we've had so many memories since then. Our wedding, buying our first house, traveling to Europe. In the grand scheme of things, does one song from a road trip over a decade ago really still matter? To me, it's just a song. But to Ryan, it's like this sacred anthem of our relationship. So, when he started talking about how he wanted it on his birthday playlist, the playlist he'd been curating for weeks, it felt like a small ask. I said, sure, add it to the list, thinking that would be the end of it. But no, every time he talked about the party, he'd somehow loop the conversation back to the song. It's going to be such a special moment, he said. I can't wait for everyone to hear it. At one point, I joked, you know it's just a song, right? And he looked at me like I'd just insulted his entire family. He said, it's not just a song, it's our song. I laughed it off, trying not to roll my eyes, and moved on. I guess this is where Ryan and I are different. He thinks it's these little things that keep our relationship alive, while I think it's the big gestures, the trips, the milestones, the way we support each other day in and day out. I mean, who has the mental bandwidth to hold on to every single detail from the past? Still, I figured if the song made him happy, I'd let him have his moment. It didn't seem worth making a fuss over. I even thought it was kind of cute how excited he got about playing it at the party. He said something like, "This song reminds me why I fell in love with you." And I just smiled and nodded, thinking it was one of those sweet but sappy things he says sometimes. If only I'd realized how much weight he'd put on it. Maybe I would have kept my mouth shut when the party rolled around. But at the time, I didn't think it was a big deal. Ryan had been buzzing all day, practically floating around the house with this giddy energy. I mean, I get it. It was his birthday, and we had friends coming over. But still, watching him carefully arrange bowls of chips like they were Michelin star dishes was a bit much. He kept fussing with the playlist, too, muttering things like, "It's gotta hit just right when the song comes on." I didn't say anything because, honestly, I thought it was cute. Over the top, but cute. Ryan always throws himself into things he cares about, and if arranging a playlist was his way of dealing with work stress, who was I to stop him? So, I let him have his moment, even though I rolled my eyes when he wasn't looking. By the time our friends arrived, the house was warm with laughter and conversation. Ryan was in his element, cracking jokes, refilling drinks, and making sure everyone was having a great time. And honestly, I was having a good time too. I'd worked hard to make this party happen, and seeing him so happy made it feel worth it. Then the song came on. I was in the middle of a conversation with one of our friends when I heard those opening notes. Ryan froze for a second, like someone had just handed him a winning lottery ticket. Then he turned to the room with this huge grin on his face and said, "Guys, this is the one. It's the song that reminds me of how I fell in love with my amazing wife." The room quieted as everyone turned to look at me, smiling expectantly. Ryan's eyes were shining, like he was about to pull me into some magical moment, and I panicked. It felt so cheesy, so unnecessarily theatrical. It wasn't like he was proposing to me again. It was just a song. I laughed, trying to lighten the mood, and said, "Are we really making this our whole personality now?" The second the words left my mouth, the energy in the room shifted. The warm buzz of conversation fizzled out, and all I could hear was the faint hum of the music. Ryan's face fell for a split second before he covered it with a nervous laugh. "She's just kidding," he said to the group, though his voice had lost some of its earlier warmth. Everyone chuckled awkwardly, but it was that kind of laugh people do when they're not sure if they're supposed to. My best friend gave me a look. One of those, "What are you doing?" looks. But I ignored it. I mean, come on, it was just a joke. The party picked up again, but Ryan wasn't the same after that. He kept smiling, kept hosting, but there was this tightness to him, like he was trying too hard. Every time I glanced at him, he was avoiding my eyes. By the time the guests left, the house felt eerily quiet. I started cleaning up, thinking we'd laugh about it later. But when Ryan walked into the kitchen, his face was serious. "Did you really have to say that?" he asked, his voice calm but strained. "What?" "It was a joke," I said, brushing him off as I stacked empty cups. "No, it wasn't. You made me feel stupid in front of everyone." I froze. "Ryan, come on. I didn't mean it like that." "But that's how it came across," he shot back, his voice rising slightly. "That song means something to me, to us. It's not just a stupid song. It's from one of the happiest times in my life. And you made fun of it." I could feel my defenses rising. "I wasn't making fun of it, Ryan. I was just trying to keep things light. You were turning it into this whole, I don't know, dramatic thing." "Because it is a big deal to me," he said, his voice breaking a little. "It reminds me of how far we've come, of why I love you, and you just laughed at it like it was nothing." I opened my mouth to argue, but no words came out. He looked so hurt, like I'd taken something precious and stomped all over it without even realizing it. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I pushed it down, telling myself he was overreacting. "Ryan, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, but you're taking this way too personally." His shoulders sagged, and he gave me a look I couldn't quite read. "Maybe I am," he said quietly, "but you don't seem to care either way." With that, he walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there with a handful of dirty cups and a knot of emotions I couldn't untangle. The morning after the party, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Normally, Ryan would be humming in the kitchen, whipping up coffee for us both, and maybe sneaking a leftover cupcake from the night before. But not today. Today, he was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his mug like it held the answers to the universe. I walked in, forcing a cheerful tone. "Hey, birthday boy, want some eggs?" He didn't look up. "I'm not hungry." I shrugged, brushing it off. "Suit yourself." But as I cracked the eggs into the pan, I couldn't ignore the knot forming in my stomach. Ryan wasn't the type to hold grudges. He might sulk for an hour, sure, but then he'd bounce back, always the optimist. This was different. I sat across from him, the silence growing unbearable. "Look, are you really still upset about last night? I told you, I didn't mean anything by it." He finally looked at me, and the tiredness in his eyes caught me off guard. "It's not just last night, okay? It's—" He trailed off, shaking his head like he didn't even have the energy to finish. Never mind. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the joke. Or was it? I replayed the moment in my head. The room going silent, the way his face fell, and felt a small flicker of something uncomfortable. Regret? No, it couldn't be that. I didn't mean to hurt him. How could I be at fault for something I didn't even intend? Later, while scrolling on my phone, I got a text from my friend Claire, who had been at the party. It was a simple message, but it hit like a brick. "Hey, you okay?" That comment about the song seemed kinda harsh. Ryan looked crushed. Harsh? Crushed? I stared at the screen, my face flushing with heat. It was just a joke. A joke? Why was everyone acting like I'd committed some unforgivable sin? The house felt emptier than usual over the next few days. Ryan was still there, but he wasn't there. He was quiet, polite, and distant in a way that felt wrong. It wasn't like we were fighting. There were no shouting matches, no icy silences. But it was worse than that. It felt like a wall had sprung up between us, and I couldn't figure out how to tear it down. One night, I couldn't sleep. I found myself replaying the party over and over, every detail sharper in the quiet of the dark. I saw Ryan's face when I made the joke, the way his smile faltered, the flicker of hurt before he covered it with a laugh. I remembered the awkward silence that followed, the way people avoided looking directly at either of us. I thought about the song, how he'd lit up when it started playing, how he'd turned to me with that big, earnest smile like I was still the girl he fell in love with all those years ago. And then I thought about how I'd snuffed out that moment with one careless comment. I'd laughed because it felt cheesy, but what if it wasn't to him? What if that moment had meant more than I realized? The memory of our road trip came rushing back. The windows down, the wind in our hair, and that song playing on repeat as we drove through the mountains. I hadn't thought about it in years, but now it was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. Had it really meant so much to him? And if it had, why hadn't I remembered? A few days later, I was tidying up the living room when I found it. A small, plain envelope tucked under the coffee table. It must have fallen during the party. I opened it without thinking, figuring it was one of the thank you cards Ryan had picked out for our guests. Inside was a handwritten note in Ryan's neat, blocky handwriting. "To my amazing wife, thank you for being my partner all these years. I'll always cherish that first road trip when we played this song and dreamed about our future together. It was the moment I knew you were the one." My throat tightened. He'd written it for me. It wasn't just about the song. It was about us. It was about how he saw me, about the memories and meaning he'd carried with him for years, while I'd let them slip away. I sat down, the letter trembling in my hands. Suddenly, I felt small, selfish. How could I have been so blind, so dismissive? The song wasn't just a cheesy relic from our past. It was a thread tying us together, a symbol of something bigger than either of us. And I'd mocked it, Publicly, the weight of it settled over me like a heavy blanket. For the first time, I wondered if Ryan's distance wasn't just hurt, it was disappointment. Maybe he was starting to see me the way I feared he might, as someone who didn't value the things that mattered to him. I wanted to fix it, to go to him, show him the letter, and tell him I understood now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was too late, that the damage had already been done. It had been a week since the party, and things hadn't gone back to normal. Ryan was still distant, polite but detached. The warmth that usually defined our relationship had drained away, leaving behind a cold, unsettling quiet. I tried to act like everything was fine, asking him about his day, offering to make dinner, but his answers were clipped, his smiles forced. One night, while putting away laundry, I stumbled across a photo album buried under a pile of sweaters in the closet. It was one of those old-school albums, the kind with actual printed photos tucked behind plastic sleeves. I didn't even remember we had it, but when I opened the cover, my heart sank. The first picture was from the road trip. There we were, grinning like idiots in front of the car, Ryan's arm around my shoulders. I could practically hear the laughter in the photo, feel the warm summer air. Page after page was filled with snapshots of that trip. Campfires, roadside diners, silly selfies. And then, at the very end, there was a Polaroid of us sitting on the hood of the car, the mountains behind us, and a line scrawled in Ryan's messy handwriting along the bottom. You and me, forever, our song on repeat. The memory came rushing back so vividly it almost knocked me over. I could hear the song playing in my head, its melody twining through the laughter, the stolen kisses, the endless hours of driving. Back then, it was our song. We played it non-stop, joked about how it was the soundtrack to our love story. How could I have forgotten? How could he have held onto it so tightly while I let it slip away? Suddenly, I understood why he'd been so hurt. The song wasn't just a memory to him. It was a piece of who we were, of what we'd built together. And I dismissed it like it was nothing. But I still didn't realize just how deeply that dismissal had cut. The next morning, I found Ryan sitting on the couch, headphones on, his phone in his lap. I almost didn't want to disturb him, but I needed to apologize, to tell him I'd finally gotten it. "Ryan?" I said softly. He looked up, pulling off his headphones. "Yeah?" My voice faltered. "I found the photo album last night, from the road trip." He nodded, his face unreadable. "And I read the note you wrote," I continued, my heart pounding. "The one about the song. I didn't realize how much it meant to you. I didn't realize how much I meant to you back then." He stared at me for a moment, then sighed. "You didn't just dismiss the song, you dismissed me. I was trying to share something important, something that mattered to me, and you made it into a joke." His words hit like a slap, but I stayed quiet. He was right. "I kept thinking," he went on, his voice trembling slightly, "about how many other things I've held on to that you've forgotten. How many moments we've had that I thought were special, but you didn't even bother to remember." Tears stung my eyes. "Ryan, that's not fair. I care about you. I've always cared about you." "Then why didn't it show?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "Why is it always me, holding on to the little things? Why do I always have to be the one who remembers?" I opened my mouth to argue, but I couldn't find the words. He was right. I'd taken him for granted, assumed his boundless love and effort would always be enough to sustain us, without ever asking if I was giving enough in return. Ryan stood, slipping his phone into his pocket. "I need some time, okay? To think about what I want. What we want." "What does that mean?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "It means I love you," he said quietly. "But I'm not sure if we are what I need anymore." I watched him walk out the door, the sound of it closing behind him echoing in the empty house. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just losing the song. I was losing him. And it was entirely my fault. For the first time in years, the house felt unbearably quiet. Ryan hadn't stayed out overnight. He wasn't that kind of person. But the man who came home wasn't the same one who had left. He was distant, polite, and almost too calm, like he'd resolved something within himself that I wasn't part of. I tried to bridge the gap. I made his favorite dinner, left little notes in his lunch bag like I used to, and even went out of my way to bring up good memories of our time together. But every effort seemed to fall flat. Ryan would thank me, always with that quiet, polite tone, but it never felt genuine. One night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. As he sat reading on the couch, I walked over and sat down beside him. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. "Ryan, can we talk?" I asked softly. He set the book down and looked at me, waiting. "I know I hurt you. I've been thinking about everything, about the song, the road trip, all of it, and I understand now. I wasn't just dismissing a song that mattered to you. I was dismissing a part of you, and I am so, so sorry." He nodded but didn't say anything. The silence stretched, and I felt like I needed to fill it. "I don't know why I said what I said at the party," I continued. "Maybe I was embarrassed, or maybe I've just been selfish. But I've realized how much I take you for granted, and I don't want to lose you because of it. Please, Ryan, can we fix this?" His expression softened, but the sadness in his eyes didn't fade. "I appreciate that, really," he said. "And I do believe you're sorry. But this isn't just about the party. It's about years of feeling like I'm the only one holding on to the pieces of us that matter." I felt tears sting my eyes. "That's not true, Ryan. I love you. I care about us." "But you didn't show it," he said, his voice steady but resolute. "And now, I don't know if I can keep giving so much of myself to someone who doesn't see me the way I see them." I felt the weight of his words settle over me like a heavy blanket. He wasn't angry or spiteful. He was just done. Ryan moved out a week later. Not in a dramatic, storming off kind of way, but in the quiet, methodical way that told me he'd been thinking about this for a long time. He packed his things slowly, pausing every so often to ask if I wanted to keep something we'd shared, our wedding photo album, the set of mismatched mugs we'd collected over the years. I said yes to everything, but as I watched him take his clothes, his books, and his playlists, it felt like he was taking the pieces of himself I'd always taken for granted. For the first few weeks, I thought it was just a phase. I told myself he'd miss me, that he'd realize he couldn't live without me, and that he'd come back once the dust settled. But then I started hearing things from mutual friends, how Ryan had picked up hiking again, how he was taking road trips to places he'd always wanted to visit but never did, how he was happy. The first time I saw a picture of him smiling on Facebook, standing at the edge of a cliff with his arms raised like he was on top of the world, it hit me like a punch to the gut. He looked lighter, freer, like a weight he'd carried for years had finally been lifted. Meanwhile, I was still in the house we'd shared, surrounded by memories that felt heavier now than ever. I tried reaching out to him a few times, but his responses were brief, polite, and always final. "Thanks for checking in. I'm doing well. I think this space has been good for both of us. I wish you the best." I couldn't argue with him. He deserved better than what I'd given him, and now he was finding it on his own. Watching him thrive while I was left with the wreckage of my own choices was its own kind of punishment, a slow, relentless reminder of what I'd lost because I hadn't cherished it when I had it. Ryan's life was moving forward. Mine felt stuck, haunted by the echoes of a love I'd let slip away. And I had no one to blame but myself. The house feels like a museum now, quiet, untouched, and full of relics of a life I used to have. Ryan's side of the closet is empty, his favorite mug is gone, and the playlists he once curated play only in my head. It's strange how you don't notice the little things someone does until they stop doing them. I keep replaying everything over and over, not just the party, but the years leading up to it. All the times Ryan tried to share something meaningful, and I brushed it off. All the times I thought being practical and logical was enough. not realizing I was slowly erasing the magic from our relationship. I used to think he was overly sentimental, that he made too big a deal out of small things. Now I realize those small things were the foundation of what we had, and I was the one who let the cracks form. I spend my evenings sitting on the couch, scrolling through old photos and videos of us together. There's one clip from that road trip so many years ago where we're laughing so hard I can barely breathe. The camera pans to Ryan, his face full of pure, unfiltered joy. And in the background, the song is playing. I've played that clip so many times I've memorized every word of the song. I try to sing along sometimes, but my voice cracks halfway through. It doesn't feel like my song anymore. It feels like his, something he took with him when he left. I tell myself I should move on, but the truth is, I don't know how. I've built this prison for myself, made of regret and memories, and I don't think I deserve to leave it. Every now and then, I hear about Ryan. He's thriving, traveling, meeting new people, rediscovering himself. Mutual friends tell me how happy he seems, how much lighter he is now. I'm happy for him, I really am. But it hurts. Last night, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine and played the song for the first time in months. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, and for a brief moment, I could almost feel him next to me, like he used to be. But when the song ended, I was alone again. I hit replay, and then I hit it again. It's the only way I know how to hold on to him now.